case now shows that Labor is actually the ones that are leading this debate. And broadly speaking, the union movement have been fantastic in actually landing blows on the Morrison government for keeping or suppressing wages for the last 9 years and not actually addressing the things that voters usually see them as being stronger on. So I think that this has been a great boon for the Labor movement. And hopefully a great outcome for the Labor Party on election day when people go to vote and vote with these issues in front of mind, and that the Labor Party are the political party that can actually deal with these properly.
It's interesting because the issue of climate change always used to be a way that the Liberals would wedge Labor. Of course, we had the experience in the last election where the Liberals were very aggressive in pairing a non-existent alliance between Labor and the Greens and suggesting that if Labor got anywhere near government, the Greens would be their puppet masters, which of course was like a devastating campaign messaging in Queensland, where Labor was trying to straddle, responsible environmental policy and climate action policy with of course, protecting industrial communities and not, like scrap heaping workers, particularly in Queensland, particularly in the mining industry. It's interesting to see how quickly that has turned around. Statements from Matt Canavan saying net zero is dead have been reacted to really negatively in Queensland, in the very communities that the Liberal National Party, as they call themselves in Queensland, really had in their pocket in the last election. Do we think we're at the point where those communities are looking for economic certainty in such a way that, that Labor's attempts to go down the middle and go, we will create 600,000 climate jobs, 5 out of 6 will be in the regions, is that the message that will give them that issue without the wedge in this election, do you think?
I think it's a fantastic policy that the Labor Party did announce during the campaign. And, Van, you're from a mining community. I grew up in the Latrobe Valley, and talking to, family and friends that have worked or work in the coal mining sector in the Latrobe Valley, they're not particularly wedded to coal as a form of energy production. They just want jobs.
No.
They just want good paying jobs. And you've sort of started to see governments start to look and invest in renewable energies in those communities. And those workers are saying, we'll work on those jobs. A lot of people in the Latrobe Valley and Gippsland take pride in the fact for the last, 50, 60 years, they've been working to keep the lights on for Victorians. And if they can keep doing that, but within renewable energy work as well, then they'll do that, and they'll be more than happy to do that. And what I liked about the Labor Party policy sought to achieve that, straddling both the challenges we're having with climate change, but also talking about climate change from a job creation perspective as well. And I think that was really, really smart.
Well, the other side of that is manufacturing, isn't it? And I think one of the things that we discovered during the toughest times of the pandemic, which is still ongoing, but the toughest times, was that we didn't make the things we needed anymore. And we were exposed to being at the end of those supply chains. And one of the issues that the movement is very, very big on is, revitalising manufacturing, smart manufacturing, new manufacturing and green industries that will create those sort of jobs you're talking about, Stephen, and give us some sort of sovereign capacity when it comes to making stuff for ourselves, because we learned the hard way that if we don't do that and we don't have those jobs and that work available to Australian workers, then we can get ourselves into quite a world of hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the successes that we've seen with state Labor governments here in Victoria, in Queensland, and the most recent election in South Australia and in WA is that those governments have led their campaigns talking about job creation and investing in manufacturing and investing in infrastructure and building things here at home. And so what I like about the Albanese campaign thus far has been focusing on that job creation and investing in building things here at home.
Well, we're not that far away from a start here, Stephen. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Just to finish, what's the one thing that Anthony Albanese has to walk away from tonight with the average viewer and person who's tuning in knowing about him? What's if he has to walk away with one idea in someone's head, what do you think it is?
Look, I think he started to do it quite well in the first debate. And I think he wants to ground his own personal narrative, his own story of self and the values that shape who he is as a leader with the hopes and aspirations of voters out there in voterland. And I think that all the questions he's going to be getting, he needs to try and tie that back into the meaningful benefits that voters want to see from the Labor Party. So I think that the sort of this frame about building a better Australian future, he just needs to bring that home, but lift it up with meaningful benefits, specific policies that he's going to bring to government if he is elected, and how we can actually physically change the way that this nation looks at itself into the future.
Thanks, Stephen. Let's hope he hits one over the monster seats and can round the 4 bags. There's a baseball metaphor.
Look, I'm learning a lot tonight. I love it. You're so street. You're so street.
Stephen,
the Marky Mark of political commentary. That's a Boston joke.
Southie. Thank you, Stephen. Thanks a lot. Do we say enjoy the debate? Are we allowed to enjoy?
Engage furiously.
Engage as a citizen with great vigor in the debate.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm pro vigor. I mean, I'd go to that demo.
Learning something new. Oh, I'm here tonight. Excellent.
Everybody, this is the wonderful Stephen Donnelly from Dunn Street. He's a campaign consultant. He hosts the Socially Democratic podcast and sometimes does cross-pod collabs with me and Ben on the week on Wednesday.
I'm going to get you on my podcast too at some point for a collab on the job, Stephen.
Let's talk. Francis happy to talk Red Sox, except only when we're winning though.
Okay, fair enough. I think we were on the same page.
It's beautiful, and I've been present.
Red Sox Nation. Excellent.
It's beautiful. It's lovely.
Thank you, Stephen.
All right, thank you, Stephen. So apparently the Lego is finishing.
Wow.
I know. It's quite the heated Lego episode. I'm slightly terrified. I'm a democracy enthusiast. I love elections. I engage with politics. I like being part of the conversation. And I've got this terror that the Lego will finish and people go, no, it's Sunday night. I go out for a pizza. What do you think is going to happen?
No, I think people are hanging around now. I think we're getting a sense that we're 2 weeks out and it's time to get it on.
Can you match the Lego with excitement?
I think they might have to build something in Lego while they're there. I think Ewan's just going to come out with a box of stuff and say, here's a box of Lego. Whoever can make the house first.
Yeah.
Solve the Lego housing crisis by building a house.
Solve the Lego housing crisis. Do something about road congestion. Lego solves all problems. Do you know what Lego could do? A bit of Australian manufacturing. I mean, it'd be nice to have an Australian manufacturing policy. Infrastructure Week has been going for 9 years, of course.
I think the infrastructure ministers should have to actually build something with Lego.
Yeah, to prove their credentials.
We're just giving Channel 9 show ideas now.
Well, look, it's happy I don't mind giving back to the community in which I live. And if somebody wants to invest millions in a policy
Lego-led recovery,
extreme Lego political solutions, can we solve climate change with Lego?
Unless it's made of plastic, so in the process of creating the Lego might actually be problematic. But
yeah, it's true. What are you hoping to see in the debate tonight?
I'm looking forward to seeing Anthony Albanese actually articulate once again why Labor does understand the needs of working people. I mean, you and I are here, and our audience is here tonight because, often, I think for the last few elections, the progressive side of politics has failed to articulate strongly enough the values of the union movement and the importance of having work, secure work, decent pay, good jobs, and that sort of sense of security in your working life that helps you build a stronger community, raise your family if you have one, and just live with a bit of dignity and a bit of certainty. Not too much to ask. And in a country as rich as ours, I think it's there are no excuses not to be doing it. And so
there are no excuses. And we are at a time where there's record inequality. Like, inequality hasn't been this bad in Australia since the end of the Second World War. Like, that old economic document of fairness has been really shredded. And I want to see a commitment to the Australian values of fairness. I think that's the quality that defines us as a society.
Okay, so we're about to head across. Jill screen you now with Channel 9. So the idea, remind people, Van, if people want to follow along, they can tweet along with us and use the hashtag LeadersDebate. Send your messages through. We've got the list. Remind people they can find the list.
The list is at the top of my Twitter profile at VanBadHam. You can join the Twitter list and see what unions and the union family and their friends are all tweeting. We'll be tweeting madly, and we'll also be commentating with these wonderful
emojis. We love them.
And then we'll see you for a bit of chat after the debate.
Okay, let's go across now to the debate hall and find out what's being said as the leaders get ready to rumble. Catch you on the other side.
On 9 Television and 9 Now, through the websites of Australia's leading newspapers and simulcast across our radio network. This debate is, of course, all about you at home, your issues, your concerns, and who has the best plan to make your lives better. So tonight, you'll score this debate. You'll decide who's won. In the corner of your screen is a QR code. Use your phone to scan that code anytime during the debate, and you'll be invited to vote anonymously. Or you can head to 9news.com.au. There is one question waiting for you there right now. More will be added throughout the evening, and we'll reveal your viewer verdict once the debate is over. Well, we know Australians have a lot of questions, so to make sure we get through as many of them as possible tonight, both leaders have agreed to keep their answers to 60 seconds, except for their opening statements, which will be 90 seconds. Our leaders have only blank paper and a pen with them to make notes throughout the evening. Well, it's time now to get started. The Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, won the coin toss earlier and will give the opening statement. Over to you, Mr Morrison.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Happy Mother's Day. I'm incredibly optimistic about Australia's future. What we've been able to achieve together over these last 3 years, and particularly the last 2, has been quite extraordinary as we've come through one of the biggest challenges our country has known since the Second World War. We faced down 15% unemployment, and now we're at 4% unemployment. And we know that a strong economy is what can secure a stronger future. A strong economy is what can ensure we can improve the lives of Australians. And so this election is a choice about a stronger economy under the plan we've had in place and takes us into the future, or a weaker one, about a stronger future or a more uncertain future. Our plan delivers another 1.3 million jobs, 400,000 more small businesses, investments in the skills and infrastructure that Australians need to grow, lower taxes, and ensuring that we're investing in the clean energy, the better roads that are needed right across the country, and of course guaranteeing essential services that you rely on, and defending our country with record investments in defence. This is a choice. It's a choice between strength and weakness. It's a choice between certainty and uncertainty. What you know about the government and what you don't know about the Labor Party and the opposition, who have had 3 years to tell you but haven't. So tonight, it's all about a choice between who can best manage that economy for a stronger future, because a strong economy means a stronger future.
That's your time. Thank you, Mr Morrison. Mr Albanese.
Well, thanks very much. And I join with Scott in wishing all the mums out there a very happy Mother's Day. A better future is within our reach. And if I lead Labor into government, this is what a better future will look like. We'll have cheaper childcare. We'll have stronger Medicare, including with cheaper medicines, and make it easier to see a doctor. We'll have more secure work, and we have a plan to lift wages. We also have a plan for clean energy through renewables. We can have cleaner, cheaper energy driving advanced manufacturing here, bringing back jobs here, having a more resilient economy here so we can stand on our own 2 feet. And we can train Australians for those jobs with fee-free TAFE and with additional university places. And we need to fix the crisis in aged care. It was summed up in the interim report with a one-word statement: neglect in its title. Older Australians deserve dignity and respect in their later years, and we have a plan to deliver that. The truth is, we can't afford just 3 more years of the same. 3 more years of drift and neglect, 3 more years of not accepting responsibility. Your vote is powerful. Your vote can change the country, and with a better government, we can be an even better country. I'm committed to working each and every day to accepting the responsibility that comes with high office and creating a better future for Australia.
Well, thank you both. And before we begin with our questions, I'd like to get a commitment from both of you that we will have truthful answers tonight.
Of course.
Yes.
Now, we know right around the country, households are of course concerned about forking out to feed their families, how much the groceries are costing in their baskets every day. What can you do to actually reduce the cost of lettuce and even on a day like Mother's Day, the cost of flowers? Mr Albanese.
Well, what you can do is have a plan to address cost of living issues. And that's why we've put forward practical plans. Ones that'll make a difference for working families by having cheaper childcare. We have a plan for cheaper medicines, so the maximum price will be $30. We also have a plan for the economy that makes sure that we prioritise productivity so that we're not placing upward pressure on inflation. So our plan, which consists of powering Australia for cheaper energy, which consists of fixing the NBN, better infrastructure investment, cheaper childcare and making more things here, is all aimed at growing the economy in a way that doesn't put additional pressure on inflation. They're the sort of measures that you can do that will make a practical difference to people's lives.
Mr Morrison, letters cost $5, we know that. How can you actually reduce that cost?
Dealing with the costs of living in Australia, and there is upward pressure on those costs of living. We know what's causing them. It's been caused by international factors all around the world, the war in Europe, and of course the disruption that has occurred all around the world following the pandemic. But the way we've been able to address this issue is making sure we manage money wisely. Australia has maintained our AAA credit rating, one of only 9 countries in the world to do so during the pandemic. And that meant through our economic plan, we've turned the budget around by over $100 billion in the last year. That meant we could cut the fuel tax. It meant we could pay $250 to pensioners and others on fixed incomes, and $420 that Australians could keep more of what they earn when they put their tax return in on the 1st of July. We can't control all the forces that are coming from overseas, but what we can do by managing money well, that puts downward pressure on inflation. Managing money well means that we can invest and guarantee the essential services you rely on, those cheaper medicines, and the Medicare funding, $31.4 billion, 88.8% Medicare bulk billing rate. That's how we get the job done.
Yes, Sarah, the problem with what Scott just said is that the cost of living measures that he spoke about are all temporary. They have all the sincerity of a fake tan. They disappear once people have cast their vote, and then people are back on their own again. This is a government that doubled the debt before the pandemic. And what Scott didn't tell you about the AAA credit rating was that that was achieved under the former Labor government. We were the government that achieved that, and it has been maintained. But the truth is that there is an enormous amount of waste and rorts in this budget.
That's your time, Mr Albanese. I mean, in practical terms, it sounds like a no is the answer to that question. We might go to our panel now. Deborah Knight.
Well, one of the things that can make a difference to ease the cost of living pressures is halving the fuel excise. And that's helped businesses, that's helped a lot of families. Prime Minister, will you keep that help coming beyond September?
No, that's not what we're proposing to do, because what we do when we provide this relief is it's well designed, it's temporary, it's targeted, it's affordable. That's how we did JobKeeper as well. What we're ensuring we're doing by providing that cost of living relief now is to deal with the spike in fuel prices we've seen from the war in Europe and the disruption around the world. And as Treasury and many others estimate, we will see those oil prices come down by that time at the end of September.
So does that mean, though, that as we see interest rates set to rise, inflation set to rise, that all of us will be paying full price for fuel?
Once we get to the end of that 6-month period, then we will continue, of course, to provide those cheaper medicines. We'll continue to provide the strong financial management and the getting unemployment down further, which the Reserve Bank is now estimating to go to 3.5%. The best protection you have against rising cost of living is your job, and having security in your job, and being in a growing economy where you have more choices. And under our government, we've been able to get unemployment down to 4%, youth unemployment down to 8.3%. We have the lowest level of unemployment, equal lowest in 48 years. A job is what gives Australians security to deal with rising costs and rising pressures on interest rates, which as a result of the Australian economy springing back to life and leading the world.
Yeah.
Mr Albanese, with the fuel excise, obviously a lot of people are wanting help now, here and now. Will you deliver a commitment to extend the fuel excise cuts beyond September?
Well, this is a temporary change, but to take up what...
So that's a no from both of you?
We have said that we'll maintain the same position on that. But what the Prime Minister spoke about then was he spoke about the security of work. The problem is that there have never been more Australians working in insecure work than there are at the moment. We've seen this plethora of growth in labour hire and contracting out. We have 500,000 Australians who are working 3 or more jobs. Now, they're not doing that out of choice. They're doing that to try and get by. And that's why one of the things that we need to do is to address wages. The cost of living is about money in as well as money out. And in terms of wage growth, we've seen wages go backwards in the last year. We've seen wages flatline for 10 years. And the government have no plan to address secure wages. When we've asked questions in the Parliament about should Australians be paid the minimum wage, the answer from the government is that it's complicated. Well, it's not complicated to suggest that at least the minimum wage of $20.33 isn't too much to ask.
David Crowe, you have the next question.
Prime Minister, you've announced billions of dollars in spending in the last couple of months, and economists are saying that that has led in part to the Reserve Bank lifting interest rates last week. Do you take any responsibility for that interest rate rise?
Well, the Treasury themselves have disputed that outright at Senate estimates, as you know. And as the Reserve Bank Governor has also said, David, the Reserve Bank Governor himself has said that what has been driving their decision to take rates from 0.1%, and let's recall, in the United Kingdom, they're up at 1%. They've gone up 90 basis points. In New Zealand, they've gone up 125 basis points. In the United States and Canada, they've gone up 75 basis points. What has happened is Australia, because the Australian economy is leading the world out of advanced economies all around the world right now, we've got more downward pressure on interest rates in those economies and more downward pressure on the rising costs of living compared to other countries around the world. And that's because our economic plan is getting people into work, giving people confidence, businesses are investing, business are getting back on their feet. Now, you can't take that for granted. If you take down that shield that we have put up through our economic policies over the course of these last 2 and 3 years,
but are you seeing
Australia will be at risk of even higher interest rate rises and even greater pressures on the cost of living. Sorry,
Well, I'm saying, are you saying that interest rate rises are due to global factors and really it's out of your hands? It's not your job to keep the rates lower.
No, what I'm saying is that global factors, of course, have driven the Reserve Bank's decision to lift interest rates. But in addition to that, it has been the success of the Australian economy, which means that in the same way we brought to an end JobKeeper, the Reserve Bank is saying the Australian economy is getting back on its feet again. And Australians themselves have been doubling down on preparing for that time. We've had double the number of people who've gone and ensured they've moved from variable rates to fixed rates. We've also seen Australians get further ahead of their mortgages during the pandemic. They've doubled the buffer that they've had over the course of the last 2 years.
Prime Minister, that was an additional question. David Crowe, you have one for the opposition leader?
Mr Albanese, you've backed in pretty much all of this spending, and in fact you've offered some more spending of your own. So where in your economic plan is there any measure that would actually keep interest rates lower?
Because the priority that we've had in terms of our investments have been in areas which will grow productivity, which will grow the economy in a way that doesn't put pressure on inflation. Take, for example, childcare, and it's one of the reasons why our childcare plan has been backed in so strongly by the business community. Our childcare plan to assist 96% of families will be better off, 4% the same. Will lift productivity. It will increase women's workforce participation.
But that would take so long to arrive. I mean, are you basically powerless now to do anything when the Reserve Bank is talking about rates going to 2.5%?
What we have done is to make sure that in all of the areas where we've prioritised investment, they are in areas that will grow the economy. Now, Scott said last year that petrol prices and interest rates would go up under us. The truth is they've gone up under them. And the Reserve Bank have foreshadowed further increases this year. What we understand is that we need to address structural issues that address cost of living pressures
Albanese, that is
because of the pressure that will be on families right now.
The next question is from Chris Yorman.
Mr Albanese, your mantra is that everything is going up except your wages. So will you guarantee that wages will rise faster than inflation under Labor?
I certainly will guarantee that wages will grow faster than they will under this current government.
Sorry, the question is faster than inflation. So real wages will rise under Labor. Is that what you're promising?
Our objective is to have our objective is to have real wage increases, and we have practical plans to do that. Putting secure work as an objective of the Fair Work Act, addressing same job, same pay, so that people who are doing the same work get the same pay. Properly defining casualisation, dealing with the gig economy so that people in the gig economy are properly regulated and are paid at least the minimum wage. Addressing the gender pay gap through greater transparency as well. And the other thing that we will do, Chris, is address feminised industries such as aged care. We'll put in a submission to the Fair Work Commission that's dealing at the moment with aged care workers who are paid just $22 an hour. The Aged Care Royal Commission said unless we address that, people will leave the industry.
But just to summarise, you can't guarantee that real wages will rise.
The difference between myself and the current government and Scott Morrison is that we will try to do what we can in measures and structures to improve real wages. We will support, for example, minimum wage increases. At the moment, this government won't even do that.
All right, Mr Albanese, I'm sure everybody is trying, and the Prime Minister is trying to keep retail power prices down, but wholesale power prices are spiking. So can you guarantee that retail bills won't go up under your government?
Well, electricity prices have fallen 10% since I became Prime Minister.
And wholesale
prices are about 30% of the overall bill. What actually drives electricity prices is the balance which is in both transmission and in the retail. And we put in the retail guarantees, which ensured that we got rid of those default offers, which was driving people's prices up. We have the supply agreements out of the big gas companies to ensure that the gas that is going into our energy economy, we're paying about a quarter to a third of what the international price is. And we had the big retail legislation on the big energy companies, which put the strength back onto the consumer to ensure that they were getting a better deal.
But prices are on the march now, aren't they?
That's how we got prices to come down by 10%.
Wholesale
now, that's
prices
what
are on
we've
the march
achieved.
now, aren't
but
they?
wholesale prices is what people pay, Chris.
It's a third of their bill and they're on the way up.
I know, and ours are going down by 10%. Since I've become Prime Minister. Now, what I'd add to that, Chris, is what was driving those wholesale prices earlier in the year, what was happening with coal prices. And the energy market operator have already said that those coal prices feeding into the energy market that were driving up wholesale prices are now coming down. So what we've done is actually cut electricity prices. Under the Labor Party, when they were last in, electricity prices more than doubled.
But again, can I just say that the governments cannot guarantee what will happen to the retail price, can they?
What we can do is ensure that we've got reliable, affordable energy and we're not switching it off with the irresponsible targets to reduce emissions. We have affordable, achievable targets that keeps the lights on and keep prices down. Because that's what we've achieved.
I think we've got our answer. Prime Minister Deb Knight, you have the next question.
There was a time when governments tried to pay off debt. Back in black was the mantra. But taxes are being cut and spending keeps on happening. So, Prime Minister, where is all the money coming from?
What Australia has at the moment is a debt level that is lower than all of the major advanced countries around the world.
And we're facing $1 trillion in debt, though.
It will be. Within a few years' time, we'll be reaching those gross levels. Today, it's about $885 billion. We're paying 2.2% interest on it on loan terms of about 7.2 years.
So if families have to balance their budget, why not governments?
But this is exactly what we will be achieving. Before the pandemic, our government brought the budget back into balance. Now, of course, in the pandemic, we had to lean in and save the economy through JobKeeper, the single largest economic intervention which saved lives, it saved livelihoods, it saved businesses. And that expenditure ensured that the Australian economy could be where it is today, leading the advanced world, so we can be looking forward optimistically to our future. But we can't take that for granted. But getting debt and deficit under control means that you keep reducing your deficit over time. The Labor Party have already said that they're going to have higher deficits than us. And what we will be doing is ensuring that we'll do exactly what we did last time. We've already balanced that budget once, and coalitions have a record of balancing budgets.
Well, the last time we had a doubling of the debt before the pandemic. That's what happened. That's what happened.
Mr Albanese, you keep attacking the government's economic performance and their track record, but you're matching them on spending. If they're doing so badly, why do you copy them?
What they're not having is a plan for future growth. We just had a question about energy, for example. They've had.
But why do you keep matching them if they're doing so badly? That's the question.
Well, we're not matching them in a whole range of areas. Where there's a good idea, we'll match it.
But you are on cutting the price to subsidised medicines, to expanding access to the seniors card, to extending the freeze on deeming rates. You're matching them on their spending.
Because, Deb, in those areas, people are doing it so tough at the moment. But what we also need is a plan for reform. This government have had 22 different energy policies and haven't landed one. We actually need an energy policy that actually works in the medium and long term, as well as provides short-term relief. Our plan...
Like one that cut electricity prices by 10%.
Our plan, which is based upon the Australian Energy Market Operators Integrated Systems Plan, fixing transmission, ensuring that renewables are 82% of the system of the national energy market by 2030, will reduce energy costs by $275 by 2025.
But we have the modelling
which is out there. That's not right.
No, it is.
That is not right.
That's how it works.
It does not work that way, which is why our plan is completely modelled. And if you look at the system as well, for the same reason.
How do they recoup the investment? How do they recoup the investment on the increase in transmission?
For the same reason that households, every state government is committed to the integrated systems plan of the Australian Energy Market Operator.
And how much more are you going to spend on transmission?
It is happening now. That investment will happen, and
how much extra are you going to spend?
And the plan is there.
How much more are you going to spend on transmission?
Is there. No. Transmission
because then they have to recover that from the consumers.
Transmission is an investment, Scott.
Yes, I know.
For the same
reason, from the consumers.
For the same reason, Scott.
And they pay the electricity prices, which mean prices go up.
Well, it's just not right.
It's 30% of the bill.
It is the same reason why someone puts a solar panel on their roof, because what it does is you make that investment and it reduces your power prices. That same principle applies to the economy. You have, Scott, how much are you spending on Snowy 2.0?
We're spending $5 billion.
Yeah, and it won't be plugged into the grid when it's opened.
Well, of course it will be.
No, it won't be.
Of course it won't be.
You don't have a plan, so it goes into the grid on day one. And that is the problem here. No, you haven't addressed the low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit you have not addressed. And low-hanging fruit, when it comes to fixing energy in this country, is fixing transmission.
Yes, and that puts up the price of
electricity.
No, it
doesn't. It makes sure that renewables can go into the grid.
They're 30% of the bill, Anthony.
It makes sure
30% of the bill, and they recover it. They recover those costs from the consumers. There isn't an energy
company or energy economist in the country who agrees with you.
No, there are Frontier Economics is one. And even the Grant Institute, I remember, actually made comments in favour of this as well. If you cut up the transmission costs,
when it comes to energy and climate, you are all over the shop. Just all over the shop.
Electricity prices down 10%.
Mr Morrison, Mr Albanese, there's plenty of time for this contest of ideas. So thank you both for your time. Next question, David Crowe.
Mr Albanese, young Australians are dealing with rising rents, out-of-reach house prices, student debts. Do you have in your agenda one single big policy just about helping young people?
Well, young people are doing it really tough. There's no doubt about that. And in order to address housing, what you need is a comprehensive plan. And we have that. We have that in terms of increased investment in social housing. We have that with 20,000 additional housing dwellings. We have a plan for 10,000 affordable housing units for essential workers. We also have a plan for emergency housing in a range of other areas. But we also have our Help to Buy scheme. The Help to Buy scheme would enable low and middle income earners to have that assistance with a shared equity scheme. Now, that's something that's operated in Western Australia for 30 years and has operated
Excuse me, Mr Albanese, it's not really just about young Australians, though. That's across the board, that scheme. And also, it's only 10,000 homes every year. Now, Australia has 10 million households. So isn't that just a drop in the ocean when young Australians are trying to get to the Australian dream?
Well, it is true to say, David, that young Australians are finding it more and more difficult to get access to the great dream of home ownership. But what we have is modest, practical plans to make a difference, whether it's public housing, whether it be affordable housing, or whether it be assisting people into home ownership. That's an additional plan from the ones that we've supported the government to implement.
Mr Morrison, you mentioned the $886 billion Commonwealth debt a little earlier. How long is it going to take young Australians to pay that back?
They will be in work. They will have jobs and an economy that is coming out of this pandemic stronger than any other advanced economy in the world because we put JobKeeper in place. because we put the cash flow boost in place, because we took action, and yes, we had to borrow to do that. And had we not borrowed, the Australian economy would not look like it does today. And I think Australians understand that, and that's why they supported those programs so importantly. But the biggest thing I think we can do for young Australians is to make sure they get jobs. And that's why we have 800,000 training places as part of our budget just this year. And that's ensuring those training places to the tune of $3.7 billion. That comes on top of the support we've been getting apprentices into trade training. We have more apprentices in trade training today, 220,000 of them, than we've had since records began in 1963. I know from being a social services minister that if you don't get a young person into a job by their early 20s, the chance of them spending a lifetime on welfare goes through the roof. So my mission has always been to get young Australians into work.
Chris Hillman, your question.
Our character has been a central part of this campaign. In fact, Mr Albanese, your campaign rests on the claim that the Prime Minister is a liar. This week you claimed you were not given the opportunity to detail a policy you clearly did not know. Wasn't that a lie?
No. I do know the policy, Chris, and the policy centres on making sure...
Sorry, at the time you clearly did not know it.
No.
We're not talking about the policy now, we're talking about your response to the policy. Your central claim against the Prime Minister is that he routinely lies. So, did you know the policy at the time? And when you said you weren't given the opportunity, wasn't that a lie?
No, it wasn't, Chris. The NDIS is about people. And that was what my response was, making sure that people are put back at the centre of the NDIS. Now, we have a range of ways in which we'll do that, in terms of stopping the cuts, stopping the waste, making sure there's more efficiency, a plan in terms of people in the regions who are missing out, and fixing the National Disability
But again, Mr Albanese,
this
question is not about the NDIS. This question is about how you responded when you were under pressure, and put in the same circumstances as Prime Minister, you responded the same way, didn't you?
That's not right, Chris. The question was... the question of the NDIS isn't about a number of dot points. What it's about is, how do you fix the NDIS? Labor created the National Disability Insurance Scheme. We've been very concerned out there that people are having their programs cut with real consequences for
Mr.
people.
Albanese. I mean, this election has been about character. You've both made it about character. We do need to scrutinise that, Chris.
Scott Morrison, you say that people know you, and they clearly do. So why don't they trust you?
It's been a tough 3 years, particularly the last 2 years. And I know that over that period of time there would have been many disappointments. People would have disagreed with many of the things I did, and would have a different view about how things might have been managed. And so I can understand the hurt and the feelings that people have had coming out of a time like this. And that can lead them to feel bad about their governments and bad about their leaders, as we've seen in many places around the world. So I understand that. And what I do say to those Australians is that you've seen what we've achieved together. We have one of the lowest unemployment rates this country has ever seen. We have got an economy that is growing faster than the advanced economies of the world, and we have one of the lowest death rates in the world, and we've achieved that together.
This is about you. The Labor Party knows that. They're making it about you because they know that sentiment exists in the community. And as they would say, it's the people who know you best. Barnaby Joyce, Gladys Berejiklian, even Emmanuel Macron, people that you've worked with that have questioned your honesty. Are they all wrong about that?
Well, from time to time, I will disagree with people and they won't agree with the position that I'm taking, whether it's deciding to put the national interest first and not buy the French submarines. From time to time I have disputes with state premiers about how we do funding, and I have very firm views about these things. And many years ago, when Barnaby and I were in very different roles to the one we're in now, today, he and I, Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, leading this economy out of one of the worst times the country has ever seen.
That's time, Prime Minister. Deb, your next question.
Mr Albanese, you've been in the public eye for almost 3 decades now in Parliament, but a lot of people still say they don't know you and they don't know what you stand for. Has making yourself a small target in this campaign backfired?
Deb, I think Australians know what I stand for. I've had the same values my entire life. The values of supporting a fair day's pay for a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. The values of supporting essential universal services such as Medicare, supporting universal superannuation. Now we want to extend that.
But
to
a lot of
universal
voters,
childcare.
but a lot of voters aren't sure you even know who you are. I had a listener, Mario, contact me this week to say you used to be a radical socialist, but just because you've got a new set of glasses, how can we believe that you're a reformed man? That's Mario. What do you say to him?
Well, I came out of the womb a Labor voter, and with three great faiths. I was raised by my late mum, who I pay tribute to today. I came out with three great faiths: the Labor Party, the Catholic Church and the South Sydney Rugby League Football Club. And I've remained true to all three of them. They're the values that were instilled in me. I learnt very early on through my life the power of government to make a difference to people's lives. It's what gave me a secure roof over myself and my single mum's head in council housing in Camperdown. Healthcare was essential for her as an invalid pensioner. In terms
Mr.
of
Albanese.
my own education was something that I was able to get as well. I've held those values consistently throughout my political life.
Mr. Albanese, we have agreed to 60-second responses.
Sure.
Deb, your question to the Prime Minister.
Prime Minister, the hard truth of it is that a lot of people don't like you. And Chris referred to the comments from those on your own side, being called a hypocrite and a liar and a horrible person. Shouldn't a leader unite, not divide?
I'm the first Prime Minister to face an election after having been elected for the first time 3 years ago. And when I became Prime Minister, our party needed to be united, and that's what I've done. We haven't seen the revolving door under my leadership. I brought my party together. I brought my coalition together by getting to net zero by 2050. That is something that took a lot of leadership to bring my party together in unity. See, politics is not about when people...
2030 targets,
No, I won't increase the 2030
won't, even though you say it'll be higher.
I won't increase
because Barnaby Joyce won't let you.
No, because I think it's the wrong policy. That's why.
But you say you'll achieve better than 26 to 28.
I don't want to shut people's businesses, and I don't want to put up people's electricity prices.
So you won't achieve higher than 26 to 28.
We believe we'll hit 35.
Well,
and you want us to hit 43.
Why won't you have that as a target then?
Because
Barnaby Joyce won't let you. That's the problem with the coalition.
Our government was able to come together and ensure that we could commit to that net zero by 2050. Now, our plan is about ensuring we invest $22 billion over the next 10 years to ensure we can hit those targets out to 2050. But the question I was being asked...
Prime Minister, if you're not divisive, why aren't you campaigning in the seats where moderate Liberals are in the fight of their lives against independents?
Where I'm campaigning is where the contest is between Mr Albanese and myself.
You're not costing those moderate Liberals
votes? No, I'm very confident in my candidates and members in all of those seats.
So will you campaign
and they are strong
seats?
Local members, and they are facing local independents, or so-called. Where the contest I'm engaged in is the choice between whether Mr Albanese should be Prime Minister, someone who's never done a budget, never had a finance portfolio, and is seeking
Scott,
to take
you can't even campaign with your treasurer. You can't campaign in Kooyong.
I was with him today at a rally in Victoria. I've been in Kooyong with him. Yeah. So you can't just make stuff up, mate. I mean, you've got 53 reviews you've announced during the course of this campaign. That's more than the number of policies that you've announced. Well, you're going to hit the ground reviewing, are you, if you come to government? You've had 3 years to come up with a plan, and all you're coming up with the reviews. You can't run to be Prime Minister and just say, I'll make it up when I get there.
We're in North Sydney right now, and the member for North Sydney will not be seen with you during this campaign.
That's your assertion.
Now, we are, of course, giving you latitude here to engage. David Crowe, you have the next question.
Mr Morrison, have you seen any corruption on your side of politics in your time? And if so, what did you do about it?
No, I haven't.
Never? No wrongdoing?
No.
Never happened in the Liberal Party at all?
I haven't seen that, no.
Is that why you don't really feel there's a need for an independent commissioner against corruption federally?
I do believe there's a need for an integrity commission. And I have 347 pages of legislation, and I have $60 million to support the establishment of such an integrity commission to deal with criminal behaviour that can occur. And we've already introduced the first tranche of that, which is the Law Enforcement Integrity Commission, which now also reaches into, with $50 million to support them, reaching into the Australian Taxation Office, the Australian Consumer and Competition Commission, APRA, as well as dealing with agencies like the Department of Home Affairs.
What about that time where there was money from property developers in New South Wales that was routed down to the Free Enterprise Foundation and then back through federal offices back to New South Wales? New South Wales ICAC didn't like the look of that. Wouldn't you call that wrongdoing?
You're assuming that I have some knowledge or involvement or awareness or involvement in any of those issues, which I clearly do not.
Mr Albanese, you've spent your life in New South Wales Labor. Have you seen corruption in your time, and what did you do about it?
Yeah, quite clearly. The Independent Commission Against Corruption here in New South Wales has found corrupt conduct. That's a good thing. Whether they've found it against Labor or Liberal members of Parliament, local councillors, this is a body that Scott said was a kangaroo court and dismissed it and was rebuked by the outgoing ICAC Commissioner, as well as a massive distancing from Premier Dominic Perrottet, to his great credit. We need to make sure that we restore faith in the integrity of our political system. I think overwhelmingly, people go into politics across the spectrum for all the right reasons. They go in to take their view about how they help their fellow Australians in the best way possible. But the truth is that there's a stench around Canberra at the moment.
That includes Labor too, doesn't it?
You have
in the past.
In the past, wherever anyone has done the wrong thing, it's a good thing that action is taken. But you can't have a block of land at Leppington Triangle around Badgerys Creek.
That's your time.
That's worth $3 million, where the government pays $30 million for it. You can't have sports rorts and all of these scandals, and nothing happens on this government's watch. And the reason why we don't have a National Integrity Commission is sitting behind the Prime Minister.
You know, the truth is really that the voters out there are feeling disenchanted. Frankly, neither of them are thrilled with either of you as a choice for Prime Minister. We know that more than a quarter of the voters out there are undecided. I mean, you've been campaigning for 4 weeks. Why haven't you convinced them, Scott Morrison, that you are the one to be re-elected?
Well, you're exactly right that there is a choice. Elections are a choice.
But they're not thrilled with either of you.
Between not whether you like someone or don't like someone, it's a choice about who you think has the economic plan and the strength to lead the country at a time which is almost unprecedented since the time of the Second World War and the Great Depression. Our
Mr.
plan
Albanese,
has put people into work.
Do you think you've done enough in the 4 weeks that you've been campaigning, albeit the week you were off?
Well, to go back to your original question, Australians are disillusioned with the political system. We all need to do better. It's one of the reasons why we need a National Anti-Corruption Commission to restore faith. Now, we have a series of plans out there for cheaper childcare, for more secure work, for addressing climate change as the opportunity that it is, a range of policies. We'll continue to put those forward, and the Australian people will decide. They'll start voting tomorrow in a federal election. Our democracy is precious. We need to value it. We need to make sure that Australians can have faith in it, and that's why we need to do whatever we can to create institutions and structures that enhance that faith in our political system.
Well, can I ask then, given he's been so passionate about this, why you haven't drafted your own legislation for such a commission? You've had 3 years. You've got 2 pages. That's it.
Scott, that's not right.
No, I'm sorry.
We have put forward...
It is right, actually.
It is not right.
Where's the legislation?
We have put forward... Scott, you don't allow debates on anything in the Parliament, let alone debates on opposition legislation.
Do you have draft legislation for your commission?
As you know, oppositions don't draft legislation.
You can draft legislation any day you want.
Governments do.
No.
And our legislation...
So you've never drafted a private member's bill. You've never drafted a private member's bill, ever.
Our legislation will have... You haven't allowed any debates on private members' bill.
A private member's bill?
Yeah, I have, because previous people...
So you can do legislation. You just haven't done one for this proposal you're so excited about.
Previous governments,
so
Scott, have allowed for parliamentary debate. We have got a plan, and I'll tell you what the plan is. It's a plan that you don't like, because what you want is that the Cabinet has to decide...
There's nothing on it.
The Cabinet has to decide whether there can be an investigation. So a minister comes before you about something like Leppington Triangle or some of the other rorts and scandals which are there, and they get to decide whether an independent integrity commission, we'll have legislation this year if we're elected.
Where is it?
We will have it this year if we're elected.
You've been hiding in the bushes. Small target.
We will have it this year. And one of the things that Australians know is they will never get a National Anti-Corruption Commission under this Prime Minister.
Okay, thank you. We will pause there because we do have a lot more to come. Now, we've asked the 2 leaders a number of questions, of course, and there will be more to come. Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese will also have the opportunity to ask each other 2 questions, though they've been doing a fair job of that already. Now, they'll have a moment now to prepare for those formal questions, and for everyone watching at home, to give your viewer verdict on some of the key issues already covered tonight, you can scan the QR code on screen and start scoring this debate by voting anonymously. Radio listeners can head to 9news.com.au. Now, we have already had an enormous response tonight, so make sure you log on and have your say. Earlier, we asked whether you decided who you'll vote for, and 26% said they're yet to make up their minds. We're hoping tonight helps you do just that. You're watching a 60 Minutes special event, The Great Debate.
Well, there you have it. Half time. They've gone into the sheds for for the end of the first half, Van Badham.
We should have prepared some frozen oranges because I'm feeling a bit dehydrated because Scott Morrison said, I've never seen corruption in the Liberal Party. And Francis, I could not stop laughing. I genuinely could not stop laughing. Where's he been? Does he not watch the news? There's been all this stuff going on in New South Wales. I have some vague memory of, corruption.
Oh, you mean in that Star Chamber Kangaroo Court?
Oh, yeah, Star Chamber Kangaroo Court. I mean, we've got to get rid of ICAC because if anything says autocracy, it's governments that aren't willing to subject themselves to scrutiny. Oh, no, sorry. In the Morrison universe, it's the opposite. Nothing says autocracy like a democratic mechanism of an independent commission that has the responsibility of scrutinising government decisions to make sure there is no corruption.
You know what I also loved? When he waved around his little bit of paper saying, you haven't drafted any legislation. Look, it's 2 pages long. They're in government, and that was their entire climate change plan, the pamphlet. Remember that?
They have a plan?
They had a
I'm amazed they had a plan. I thought they just had patronising hectoring about how, the environment problem, like everything else, is not his job and someone else's fault. I literally couldn't believe that Scott Morrison was talking about plans. We've seen nothing for 9 years. Where is the climate plan? Where is the action? Where are the jobs? Where is the investment? Where is the social planning? There would be no teal movement. The teal movement itself is the symptom of the Morrison government's failure to plan. There's a Climate 200 movement, not because everybody thought, we'll just randomly spend millions of dollars for no particular reason, but because communities are literally crying out for some sense of policy leadership on, an existential issue that threatens humanity. Not my job. There's no corruption in the Liberal Party. What?
It was good to see the Labor leader at least raise the issue of secure jobs and decent pay and
local manufacturing.
All the things that we care about the most here at Australian Unions, and also, the very specific example of those in the care sector, feminised industry, who are being paid just so appallingly for the important work they do. So it's encouraging that that's on the agenda. So let's hope that continues to be brought up in the second half of the
promise around taking, dealing with the fact that, look, Australia has one of the most gender segregated workforces in the world. Other OECD countries are not like this. And we know that the 3 lowest paid industries are the ones with the highest percentage of female workers. That's not a coincidence. Women's work is undervalued. Women are channeled into insecure employment because they're often meeting really, really difficult care management obligations. And look, I'm a carer myself. It is really, really hard. Looking after my mum has made me realise just how unbelievably difficult it is for people who are caring for elderly relatives and children at the same time. They call women my age the sandwich generation because the numbers have worked out that you have this whole community of women who need flexible work so they can meet, all the chaos that comes with all their, caring commitments. And you have a government that just, is happy to just put that on women and make that their problem and focus all of their, basically they run a jobs for the boys industry policy where they turn up to factories owned by Liberal donors, ones that have shipped in, exploited foreign labour and stolen their wages, still in Western Australia, companies that have, former Howard government ministers as their chairs.
Or companies that are about to ship their jobs off overseas.
Yep, that's Ream, went to Ream. A third of those jobs are being offshored to Vietnam, not exactly a pillar of democratic values. Again and again, we keep seeing this.
Well, let's see what unfolds in the second half of the debate. And we'll be back with Liam O'Brien, ACTU Assistant Secretary, afterwards to talk about what we've heard. Let's get back to the
I'm head up. Head up.
Deep breathing.
Get through. Now, our leaders have the opportunity to ask each other 2 questions. The Prime Minister gave the first statement, so Mr Albanese will have the first question.
Thanks very much, Scott. Both you and I have unfortunately got COVID this year. But of course we followed the science and were vaccinated, fully vaccinated. The impact was less than it was on people who are unvaccinated. We followed that science. But early on in the pandemic, when Australia was running way at the back of the queue in the 90s in terms of countries of people who were getting vaccinated, you said that it wasn't a race. And as a result, there was more people had worse health outcomes, and indeed as well, there was a bigger impact on the economy. Isn't it a fact, Prime Minister, do you now accept that indeed it was a race and you should have secured vaccines earlier?
It was a race, Anthony, and we shouldn't have described it in those terms. But what we did do, working together and closely with the Chief Medical Officer at the time, who was Professor Brendan Murphy, is we were taking care to make sure that the vaccines that were approved in Australia were the right vaccines, and that I could confidently say to Australians, with the support of medical authorities, that they would be safe for Australians. And that's exactly what we did. Yes, we had our challenges early on. We made sure that we were manufacturing vaccines in Australia with the AstraZeneca vaccine, and we ensured that when we had the setbacks, I put in place the general to do this under a military command to ensure that we got the vaccination program back on track. And what we achieved is we ensured that everyone who wanted a vaccine could have one in the middle of October. That was only 2 weeks out from the original deadline that we set ourselves at the start of the year. So yes, it's true, Anthony, we had our setbacks, but we came back, we got the vaccines, and we now have one of the highest vaccination rates in the world, as well as the strongest economies, and one of the lowest death rates from COVID. A lot of people would have liked to have been in Australia when it came to coming through this COVID pandemic, because Australia has led the world.
Prime Minister, your opportunity to ask Mr Albanese a question.
Yes, Anthony, even in the last 3 years, you have been for the abolition of negative gearing and against the abolition of negative gearing. You've been for retirees' taxes and against them. You've been for tax cuts for people earning $125,000. You've been against them. That's just the last 3 years. You were for turn back of boats. That's what you say now. You're against them before. You were for a gas plant, you say now, up in the Kurri, but previously you were against it. Now, what's changed? And given you've changed your mind on so many things that are apparently so foundational and were so passionate about it being against these things, how can Australians now think that you're actually for them?
I supported the Labor Party at the last election. We had a range of policies that we put forward that were not successful. When I became Labor leader on day one, I said that under my leadership we'd be defined by being Labor leader, not by being opposition leader. That all policies would start anew and on the basis of the positions that we would come to when I announced them. So on housing, for example, we've come up with a better way. We've come up with the Housing Australia Future Fund. We've come up...
So is negative gearing now a good thing?
With our Help to Buy scheme. Negative gearing is a good thing.
But it wasn't 3 years ago.
Negative gearing. We had a policy that we took to the election where we were not succefful.
So is that why you're not approaching it?
You said...
It's just not popular.
Scott, I'll let you answer.
I'm sure.
We had... our Help to Buy scheme, you said, was good for a decade. And now you're opposing it.
Not a government scheme, I didn't.
Now you did.
No, I was talking about private shared equity schemes, not government ones.
You were talking about the Victorian government scheme in 2017.
Not a federal government scheme.
OK. So you're in favour of state government Help to Buy schemes, but not federal government schemes.
There are state government Help to Buy schemes, but they're not federal ones. And I've never favoured a federal Help to Buy scheme.
OK, all right.
You encouraged federal Labor when we were last in government. You said
private ones done by banks.
This is an opportunity for this is not an opportunity for statements. Can we get a very quick second question, Mr Albanese, to the Prime Minister?
My question to you, Scott, is this: The minimum wage in Australia is $20.33. Should all Australian workers be paid at least the minimum wage?
Well, it depends if they're running a business or not. I mean, if you're running a business, I can tell you who doesn't get the minimum wage necessarily. Small business owners when the money's not coming in the door.
That's not the question, Scott.
No, I'm sorry.
There are a whole lot of people out there who are working in the gig economy, and you're the Prime Minister of Australia, so they're not workers.
They're working they're working for themselves. That's why they do it.
But the gig economy, what it's doing is creating two classes of people. It's something that you don't seem to get. Two classes of people. Your Uber driver is not a small business person. There's someone trying to get by. There's someone who's trying to get by. And they've got an opportunity
to do just that, provided by a new economy business that is allowing them to take charge of their own life.
Agricultural workers.
And?
They shouldn't get minimum wage? Agricultural
workers who are were you referring to those who've come from overseas, Anthony, or talking about those who are working in Australia?
Agricultural workers.
Of course, agricultural workers where they're employed
but
in
Scott,
businesses
it's actually possible.
At least the minimum wage, and I'm sure they get paid more than the minimum wage.
There are actually some gig companies that have come to agreements in order to treat people as employees so that they get those minimum conditions.
So Anthony, when we introduced our changes to the industrial laws, where we wanted to go and define these things around casualisation, why did you vote against it?
Oh, Scott, your industrial laws wanted to get rid of... I'll tell you why you asked the question. Yeah. Why we voted against it, because it wanted to get rid of the better off overall test.
During the pandemic, for a brief period of time?
No.
It was.
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay, all right.
You only want to get rid of the better off overall test.
A number of questions there. No, this is
workers
a segment
to be better off
where
overall. It's pretty simple.
Excuse me. We asked you both to ask each other a question. There's been several now. Very quickly, Prime Minister, your second question.
Your Help to Buy scheme. If there's a family, young person earning $80,000
very quickly, Prime Minister.
$80,000 a year, and their partner may be earning about $30,000 a year. They'll be eligible for your scheme to go and buy that home. That's right?
Yes.
Okay, so let's just say the person who's earning $30,000 decides to go back to work full-time. They'll go over $120,000 a year. Now, under your policy, that means they'll have to pay you back your equity at 40%. Now, why is that a good thing to do in the design of that scheme? Or didn't you just think it through?
You know what's happened in the design of the scheme? It's based upon schemes that are actually...
But is that true, what I've just told you?
It's based upon schemes that are actually operating.
Yeah, but is that true?
So, for example...
Would they have to pay back the 40%?
You will have flexibility in the scheme.
But
and in terms of Victoria, you've asked your question,
Well, no, you haven't answered it, though.
You've asked your question.
Do they have to pay it back?
In Victoria, I've just said there will be flexibility and arrangements are come to. That's the way they operate now.
Do they have to pay it back
That's the way they operate now. In places like WA, in Victoria, that's not right,
You go back to work and got to sell your house.
That's not right, Scott.
It's not Help to Buy, it's forced to sell.
Okay, all right. Okay, this is more, that was more of a statement than a question. We will just get back to our panel now.
You've had enough time.
Supported it in the past. Through, Anthony, and that's the problem.
Mr. Albanese, Mr. Morrison, you've had enough time to ask the questions. We've given you more than enough.
Journalists get so frustrated when people don't answer their questions.
Is this a press conference or yes or no questions? Can we get a bit more of that? Deb, over to you.
It is Mother's Day today, and I echo wishing all the mothers a happy Mother's Day today. A quick question to both of you. In a sentence, how do you define a woman, Mr. Albanese?
An adult female.
An adult female?
Yeah.
Mr. Morrison?
Yes, I'm adult, a member of the female sex.
Because there's been a degree of confusion around that issue, so good to get your clarity on that.
Not confused at all.
I don't think it's confusing.
Well, that's good to hear. Now, women's issues and the treatment of women have dominated the last Parliament, but we've barely heard it Breda mentioned during the campaign, women's issues and the treatment of women specifically. Prime Minister, do you have a problem appealing to women, do you think?
1 in 11 women are the victims of domestic violence that results in their death in this country. 1 every 11 days, I should say. And that's why our government has put in $2.5 billion. Now, you say we haven't talked about it. This morning, I was with Jenny. We were down in Melbourne and we announced our policy to ensure that women who are suffering from cancer or have genetic diseases that could transmit, we're supporting them to be able to freeze their embryos and others, so when they're facing cancer, that they won't also face the terrible disappointment that one day they mightn't be able to have children. On top of that, we've expanded the Gidget Foundation, which is dealing with postnatal depression, and we're taking that from 20 outlets to a further 26. And this is addressing the real health needs of women.
But do you think that the issue of the treatment of women within Parliament has been resolved? Would you be happy for your daughters to work in Parliament or to work in politics?
No, I'm sorry, I don't believe it's been resolved, but I do believe that as a result of the events that took place in Parliament, the Jenkins Review and before that the Foster Review that I initiated, means that the Parliament today, and I'm sure Anthony would agree, that together we have a leadership task force across parties that is fully implementing the outcomes of the Jenkins Review, and the timetable set for that is the next 2 years. But the Foster Review, most importantly, has put in place an independent mechanism for complaints to be dealt with, which ensures that there's anonymity, but also counselling support that we've put in place that's there 24/7. So do I believe it's fixed? I don't think it's fixed in any workplace around the country. But we need to do what we need to do together to make the Parliament a safer place for women.
And Mr Albanese, I know that you echo that sentiment. You want workplaces to be safe for women. Why then won't you investigate the serious allegations of bullying and harassment of the late Senator Kimberley Kitching? Because many people very close to her believe that that treatment played a part in her death.
Well, I agree with Scott that we've worked together to improve the parliamentary mechanisms which are there, and they've passed with the support of the entire Parliament. And Kate Jenkins has played a very important role, as has Stephanie Foster. What we did in Labor was put together from under Bill Shorten in 2018 structures whereby there are procedures, again, very similar to the procedures that are now in place across the Parliament. Why won't you launch an investigation specifically into the treatment of the late Senator Kimberley Kitching? Well, Kimberley Kitching's death is a tragedy. She was just 52 years of age. The procedures that were in place have been in place for some time. Kimberley, like other members of the caucus, were all part of adopting them in 2021. They're comprehensive, they're very strong. But let me make this point as well. It's not just about people at Parliament House. Kate Jenkins has another report, the Respect at Work report. It has 55 recommendations which would apply to workplaces across the country. We need to do better.
Mr. Albanese,
we will adopt all 55 recommendations, including the obligations on employers to do what they can to make their workplaces safe.
You've been very critical, though, of the government's track record on this. How can you criticise them when you won't launch an investigation into claims of bullying by women who make up your front bench?
Look, I have utmost confidence in my front bench. And from time to time in politics, the truth is that in terms of the issue that's been raised about a committee position, from time to time there is conflict. More people want positions than are available. That happens. My experience with Kimberley Kitching was that she was making an outstanding contribution. I put her on the front bench. I kept her on the front bench. I think it is a tragedy that she was lost particularly to her family and her close friends, but to the Labor family as well, far too early.
Mr Albanese, on aged care, what do you do under your policy, which promises a lot, when a nursing home cannot afford to hire more nurses or can't find more nurses because there's a shortage? Do you shut them down?
No. Look, one of the things we'll do is work with the sector. The Aged Care Royal Commission was very clear. It made clear recommendations of a nurse in every nursing home, of 215 minutes of care, of better food and nutrition, of making sure aged care workers get better pay, and more transparency and accountability. And that's the basis of what we will take forward. Now, with regard to aged care nurses, the majority of nurses in the aged care sector right now are working part-time. So one of the things that we can do is to make sure that they get more hours and more contribution. And we have worked with the Nurses Federation on this policy.
Do you guarantee you'll have enough nurses next year?
We will deliver on our policies. and we will work with the Nurses Federation, not just in terms... One of the things that's happened as well is that nurses and other aged care workers have left the sector because of the pressure they're under. Imagine working in a nursing home and there are 4 buzzers going at once and you've got to make a decision over where to go. We have circumstances whereby...
Mr Albanese, that is your time. David Crowe, your next question.
Mr Morrison, on aged care, do you accept that the neglect in aged care happened during 9 years of coalition government and it's the coalition's fault?
It occurred over 30 years. And that's exactly what the Royal Commission has said, and that is include over the last 9 years under the previous Labor government, under the previous Liberal government before that, and the Labor government before that. The problems in aged care are very difficult, and we all know what the problems are. The solutions are very difficult. And so when it comes to 24/7 nurses, our plan, October 2024, and to get to 16 hours out of 24 hours later this year. And we're investing $300 million to ensure that we're building up the nursing workforce. And
but if it happened for 9 years under your government...
Exactly, this is why
should voters trust you to fix it if it continued for that 9 years?
Because I was the one who blew the whistle. I was the one who called the Royal Commission into aged care. I was the one who then...
Scott, under pressure from the Labor Party, under pressure from the Labor Party, we called for a Royal Commission. We took it to elections. You didn't take it to an election. You rejected it. You rejected it.
No, he did it. And it's handed its
you
recommendations
did it reluctantly
down.
because you lost the numbers on the floor of the Parliament.
Within weeks of becoming Prime Minister, I hasten to add, and we put $19.1 billion
because you lost the majority
into our response,
on the floor of the House of Representatives.
Our response of the aged care. Now, let me tell you what we've done on home care places. When we came to government, there were 60,000 home care places. Today, there are 225,000, and there'll be another 50,000. More and more Australians are going into home care. And in residential care, the needs are greater because the acute care needs in residential care have been growing year on year on year. This is a very hard problem, and it can't be simply just dismissed with a couple of glib papers here and there. Yep. What we've got is $19.1 billion of investment to fix the problem.
Prime Minister, you've drawn a red line on any Chinese military bases in the Solomon Islands. What does that mean?
Well, it means that that was something that Australia believes would be completely against our national interest, and we also would believe it would be against the Solomon Islands' national interest. And we share that view and the similar language with the United States. I mean, it's 80 years ago right now since Australia and the United States were battling in the Coral Sea. And we're here right now working together with our partners, with New Zealand, with the other many Pacific nations to ensure that we can secure the peace and stability within the Pacific.
But you understand that you do have to enforce this. You do have to enforce this in some way. Are you saying that you would be prepared, for example, to try and blockade any attempt to build a military base in the Solomon Islands?
I think it would be very unwise for any government to speculate around these issues. What is necessary in international environments such as this is to be very clear about what the various partners' positions are. That's the United States position. It's certainly our position, and I believe it's a broader position of the Pacific Island family as well. And I do not believe it would be in the Solomon Islands' interest, and the Solomon Islands government themselves have made it very clear to us that that is not an outcome they are seeking or supporting either. Well, I believe it's not in their national interest to have such a presence.
Well, what's the point? What's the point of talking about a red line if we don't know what you're going to step over it to take action?
No, what it means is that everybody has a clear understanding about what the positions are.
Do you have a clear understanding of what
partners.
that red line is? Because it seems the public doesn't.
No, I think Australians understand that Australia would work with partners to ensure that that type of an outcome would be prevented.
This has been a massive foreign policy failure. Some have commentated that it's the biggest failure since the Second World War. The government said they were going to have a Pacific step up. Instead, it's a Pacific stuff up. We know that China is more aggressive and forward-leaning in the region. We know they're trying to increase their influence in the region, and this has happened on the government's watch.
I did have a question for you.
This has happened on the government's watch. Well, I'll tell you what we did when we were...
Why did you cut defence spending?
You just asked the question, so I get to answer it?
I'd like you to answer why you cut defence spending.
OK. I'll make this comment, Scott. When I was a minister, we put US Marines into Darwin. When you've been a minister, we've had the port of Darwin sold to a company connected with Chinese Communist
Not
Party.
by the Commonwealth
by your
Mr.
party,
Albanese actually had a
your
question
party
by
with
the
your
Terry.
tick-off.
You've been telling this lie
Your
for some
party
time.
with your
You've been telling
tick-off.
this lie for
Your
some
party
time.
with your tick-off.
No.
You allowed it to happen.
No, we didn't. The federal government had absolutely no authority over that sale whatsoever.
Over territories.
No, we didn't.
Over
Not over the
territories.
sale of territory-owned assets of that
The
nature.
federal government.
Okay, I think we're getting more questions
over
between
territories.
Excuse me,
And
I think we're
unlike
getting
you, I've
more
been a
questions
treasurer
between the two of you
They
than our
have
panel.
no authority whatsoever. This is a very important point. I'm sorry. This is a very
you're
important
making
point.
lots of
telling
No,
me
Mr. Morrison,
that
Mr. Albanese,
the
that's
territory
enough. We do
government
need to move on.
that depends
We have
upon
a
Commonwealth
panel
funding,
here
you could not
waiting
have
to
had
ask you
any
questions.
influence
We have
over the
no
CLP
authority.
government
No.
in the territory
Okay,
so
when
I
they
changed
flogged
the
the
rules.
Lord
We
of
need to stop
Darwin
you
to
there.
China.
The
Can you
rules
please?
to make sure we
You
did.
both agreed to the rules for this
that the
evening.
Labor Party actually had in place previously,
Tillman
which
has a
allowed
question,
that
and we
to
will move
happen.
on to
Mr.
Chris's
Albanese, the
question.
Labor Party was dragged reluctantly to the position of believing that China was a threat. You say that we say China had
That's not
changed.
right.
You only began saying that in the last couple of
I
years.
opposed
How
the
can we
sale
have-
of the Port of
How can
Darwin
we have
at the time
confidence in the
as-
Labor
as
Party
Labor's shadow
that it will
infrastructure
stand up to
minister?
China when some of the loudest voices in the country on being pro-Beijing come from inside your party? Some
Your
of
deputy leader,
your
for a
elders.
start.
Well, that's an outrageous slur.
He runs his speeches past the Chinese government.
Labor has always been good on national security. I'll tell you who Australia turned to in World War II, in our darkest hour, John Curtin. John Curtin became Prime Minister without an election. Labor will always take national security issues seriously. We took the issue of the Port of China. It's not a former Labor minister who went on the board of the company that runs the Port of Darwin.
Bob Carr and Paul Keating thinks it's Australia's fault that the relationship is where it is now. Do
It is
you agree with
China's
them?
fault.
And will
It
you
is
be listening
China's
to them?
fault.
Well, it's the Chinese government's
She has changed. She has changed the nature of the Chinese Communist Party. And it was Tony Abbott that invited Xi to address the National Parliament. That at the time was not greatly controversial. The Chinese Communist Party has changed. It's more forward-leaning, it's more aggressive, and that means that Australia, of course, must respond. And we must work with our allies and partners
Mr. Albanese,
in the new
you've
era
had your
of
60
strategic
seconds.
competition,
So how many
which is in
times
our
has Richard
region.
Marles met with the Chinese ambassador in Australia? He's your
That
deputy
is-
leader.
That is just an outrageous
I'm just
slur.
asking you, how many times? Do you know?
Well, how many times has your government that you're a part of invited the leader of the Chinese Communist Party to address the Australian Parliament?
Once.
Once. It's the only time it's happened. Labor never did.
Yeah, so
Labor
David
so
Crowe
just
has
getting
the
back
next
to deputy leader
Labor-
who wants to be
Labor
the defence
never did.
minister,
Labor
who
never
runs
did.
his speeches
That
past the
is an
Chinese
Okay,
government.
That
okay,
is
we
an
need to-
outrageous
we need-
slur.
this is-
truth.
I'll
This
say
is
what
about
Richard Marles did.
the questions the
I'll
voters
say
are
what Richard
interested
Marles
in
did.
having
Richard
answered.
Marles
And we
went
do
to
need to move on
China
to the
and
questions that we have
criticised
from the
their
panel.
human rights record.
Thank you, Mr.
After
Albanese.
he
human
the
rights
Chinese
record.
government.
you.
No, their
That's
human
enough.
rights record
We need to
in
move on now.
China.
David Crowe, your
Something
question.
that
Mr.
Stuart
Albanese,
Robert,
we have a
your
question.
best mate, went
Mr.
to
Albanese,
China
we've
when he was
given
the
you more than
defence
enough time. The
assistant
pair of you
minister.
have had more than enough time.
and
You
he got
agreed to
sacked from
spend
his job, but
to
you
60
put him back in the
seconds
cabinet.
before coming on the program tonight.
We do
David
want to
Crowe.
talk about the pandemic as well. Mr. Morrison, you keep telling us how well your government did during the pandemic, but you did also stop Australians coming back to their own country because there weren't enough quarantine places for them. Was that a moment of shame for Australia and for you?
No, that wasn't the reason why we did that. We did it because at that time there was the outbreak of the Delta strain in India. And for a period of time, it was only for a couple of weeks, we actually froze the return of Australians who were in India coming back to Australia for a very brief period of time. And that was done on the basis of medical advice.
But it wasn't just India, was it? There were Australians in places all around the world who were struggling to
Well, I
get
thought you were
back
referring
home.
to Australian citizens or residents when you asked the question.
There were many in the UK who wanted to come home sooner.
But Australian citizens were actually barred from coming back to Australia. I thought that's what you were referring to.
They did
were
struggle to
barred,
get back here.
legally barred from doing so. And as a result, we were able to avoid for some period of time the terrible impacts of the Delta strain had we allowed that to come in. But one of the things that we did together with the state governments right from the outset is we agreed to put in place a quarantine system that was done with the states through hotels, which massively increased the capacity for us to have people come to Australia. You can't set up quarantine facilities for 50, 100,000 people just to be turning up every other day.
That's your time, Prime
And as a
Minister.
result, we put in place that system and it was very effective.
Prime Minister. That's enough.
Mr Albanese, your plans during the pandemic, you've been very critical of the government, but your plans during the pandemic included $6 billion in payments to get people vaccinated, which they did anyway, included free rat tests, which people can get now, included big quarantine centres. If those were such good ideas during the pandemic, why aren't you keeping them now?
Because they were ideas based upon limiting the impact of the pandemic. If we'd have got people vaccinated earlier, there would have been less shutdowns, less jobs lost, less impact on small business, less impact on people's health. When rapid antigen tests were available, we had a circumstance whereby people were told, go into your chemist if you're a concessional card holder and get one, but people couldn't get access to them. That's been a problem. The government was too little too late on getting the vaccine rollout happening, and it didn't learn the lessons, and the same thing happened on rapid antigen tests.
So all their ideas, or they've made mistakes, but your ideas were all fine. Weren't some of those ideas just wrong for the time?
No, they were right for the time because they would have limited the impact. You needed to act with a sense of urgency, not the sense of complacency saying it's not a race. And that's something
Anthony,
that has
you wanted
defined
to pay money to
this
people who
Prime
already
Minister.
had the vaccine.
That is something that has defined this Prime Minister. It doesn't matter whether it's the bushfires or the floods or the vaccine rollout or the rapid antigen
Mr. Albanese,
test.
Deborah and
It's
I have the
always
next question.
too little,
Mr.
too
Albanese,
late.
that's enough. Thank you.
Prime Minister, a lot of the independents who are targeting Liberal seats, the so-called teal independents, are saying point blank they don't want to work with you. In the event of a hung parliament, will you put the interests of your party above your own interests and resign as leader if that's what it takes to form government?
Well, what I'm advocating is that votes for independents, and particularly those referred to at this election, is a recipe for chaos.
But if
An
that's what it
absolute
takes for the
recipe
hung
chaos.
parliament...
And that's why, in the course of an election, which is where we are right now, I'm urging strongly against such a vote, because you can't vote for someone who won't tell you how they will vote. And that will throw Australia into a position of great chaos. Great chaos. I mean, Rob Oakeshott used to say that the minority parliament would be beautiful in its ugliness. It was just ugly.
But in the result
and we can't afford that ugliness with the crises and the challenges we're facing now. So I would urge people not to go down that path. That is a vote for chaos, and that will really prejudice your own interests, the Australian economy, and the strength of a government to deal with very major national security issues.
In the result of a hung parliament, though, voters need to know if they vote for you, will they get Prime Minister Dutton?
What I'm saying very clearly is that we have said that we won't be doing deals on policies that we don't support. That's what I've said very clearly. Now, we don't support a 60% reduction in emissions by 2030. That will destroy the economy.
Mr. Morrison, is that a yes or a no? You said before you want yes or no answers. Is that a yes or a no answer to Deb's question?
Would you be prepared to resign if that's what it took to form government?
No, what I'd simply say... Well, would you?
It's a pretty clear question.
Would you?
I'm actually... Thanks for the question, Scott.
Would you?
I am the only person running for Prime Minister in this election who's trying to form government in their own right.
Well, no, sorry, Anthony, we're both doing that.
No, you're not.
That's just
no, you're not.
it
You're
off.
part of a coalition with Barnaby Joyce.
Mr Albanese,
and we haven't since 1944.
On that key point, here's a question for you, Mr Albanese. You've ruled out a negotiation with the crossbench on your climate target.
Yes.
So what will you negotiate on?
We will not negotiate on any of the policies that we're taking to this election. But what's more, I'm seeking to form government with 76 ALP members, 76 members of the Labor caucus. We are campaigning each and every day with Labor members right across the country.
Are you ruling out any deals on anything with the crossbench?
To make sure we won't... you don't have to look theoretically. In 2013, when I became the Deputy Prime Minister under Kevin Rudd, we didn't do any deals. We went onto the floor of that Parliament
with the Greens
and said, you can make it. You can have a choice. You can have Tony Abbott as Prime Minister or Kevin Rudd. They're the choices. And what I will say is that I am campaigning very hard to form government in my own right, not as part of a coalition with anyone, certainly not like the rabble.
Well, let's just be clear. You're talking about the government that did a deal with the Greens to be government.
Mr Morrison, thank you.
I saw the pictures.
No,
everyone
that's enough.
did.
Thank you. We have the
Gentlemen,
next
we're
question.
almost done and hoping to end on something that is a little bit less combative. Will Australians continue to have access to the sports that they love on free-to-air TV if you are in power, Prime Minister?
Well, we're both promising a review on that issue. So I think the position is the same. So
No, I'm promising a bit more than that. I'm saying, yes, of course, the sports that are essential should be available to all Australians, but something else we need to address as well is making sure there's proper regulation so that when people pick up their remote and they've got their smart TV, they can get access easily.
That's the same policy that we have.
Well, we haven't done anything about it.
No,
the difference is
exactly the same.
We haven't done anything about
exactly
it.
The same
we've got a
meetings.
policy we've taken to this election recognising.
So, short story is Sharks versus Rabbitohs on free-to-air TV in the future.
Well, I'm sure if it's a game of the round as it currently works on those arrangements. But we're saying the same thing when it comes to that issue. He's promising a review, one of 53 reviews that he's going to do once he gets there. They'll work it out when they get there, apparently.
Okay.
That's it.
That's it?
Yeah, no,
All right. Well, we're done. Look, you've given us a lot to think about tonight. We know that there are undecided voters out there, and tonight has been very popular with the audience. So we thank you both for your time, Mr Morrison, Mr Albanese. We are out of time, sadly. There was a pretty heated discussion between the two of you. I mean, our panel did get in some questions, but we do have one final word from the pair of you, a closing statement from each of you. Prime Minister, you gave the opening statement. You'll go first with the closing statement.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your attention tonight. This election is a choice. It's a choice that is going to impact significantly on the future of all Australians. It's a choice between a government that has a strong economic plan that has ensured that Australia is coming out of this pandemic stronger than almost any advanced economy in the world today, with unemployment falling, with a AAA credit rating, and a budget that turned around by over $100 billion in the last 12 months so we can provide real cost of living relief. A plan that's investing in small businesses, in skills, in infrastructure, investing in the better roads and ensuring the essential services you can rely on, whether it's Medicare, National Disability Insurance Scheme, because we know how to run a strong economy. We're a known quantity, and in a time of great uncertainty and great risk, now is not time to risk things on the unknown. Labor have no plan. They are unknown and a risk. A small target is always a big risk. And I think over the course of this campaign, as they've put forward what they've been talking about, Australians have been seeing and asking the question, are they really up to this? And is Mr Albanese really up to this? You know what we've achieved together, and we can keep achieving that by sticking to that strong plan, because a strong economy means a stronger future.
You went over a little bit there, Mr Morrison. Mr Albanese, we'll give you the same time.
Thanks very much, Sarah, and thank you, Scott and Nine for hosting the debate, and thank you, the viewers at home, for watching this evening. You do have a choice when it comes to an election. You know that at the moment the cost of everything is going up, but your wages aren't. You do have a choice to change the country for the better, and we can do so much better than we're doing right now. There are real issues right now. Childcare costs are spiralling right now. Aged care is in crisis right now. Work has never been more insecure than it is right now. Climate change is an opportunity, not just a challenge right now. In spite of the floods and the bushfires, what does it take to wake up to this government to the need to take serious action on climate change? We need greater equality for women right now. We need to increase women's economic participation as well as make workplaces safer right now. These are all issues that Australia has the opportunity to go forward in and create a better future if we seize that opportunity. I believe Australia is the greatest country on earth, but with a better government, we can be an even better country into the future. And I will say this, there are four words you'll never hear from me. That's not my job. I'll never say it. If I get the job, I'll do the job each and every day.
That's your time, Mr Albanese. Well, look, thank you to both Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese for taking part tonight. Early voting in the election, as we know, opens tomorrow morning, and we hope the answers tonight have given Australians a clearer idea of how you'll vote. As for who won this debate, well, that's up to you at home. We know that there is a huge amount of traffic via the QR code on our website. Please be patient. Do keep trying. You will get through. Those who have been trying have gotten through. So stick it out for a bit longer. Our radio listeners, of course, can...
And there it is, the end of what was at times a chaotic, messy debate.
Very loud.
Very loud, a lot of shouting.
Especially from me, I did scream aloud once.
We were trying to scream at the telly again, which is what we would have been doing at home anyway.
Yeah. I mean, we've got to be who we are. That was extraordinary, Francis. That was not, I wouldn't say that was the strongest moderation I've seen in a leaders' debate.
They just sort of let it all hang out there for a while.
They really did let it all hang out there, and I don't think that was good. I think it was particularly bad for Scott Morrison, but I don't think it was really good for the tone of this election either. I think it was quite irresponsible. I'm just going to say that quite honestly. I noticed following the conversation on Twitter that a lot of people turned off. They found it very hostile. So
it's just reinforced for a lot of people that politics isn't the sort of level of debate that they expect and want from their leaders. And, you know, for the moderators there to be so hardline about the 1 minute answer, 1 minute answer, 1 minute answer, and then just to, like the teacher, just walk out of the classroom and let the kids rip for 5 or 6 minutes. And Scott Morrison loves that format where he can just try to use the bully pulpit.
The bullying and the hectoring is, I mean, you can, I look at that image of Scott Morrison in that debate and I go, that's why you've got a teal problem. That's why you've got a teal problem. You've got a problem because there's a community of people who in reality are Liberal voters with traditional Liberal values, who are from the kind of seats that used to be represented by the likes of Petro Georgiou, who were those kind of Liberals who are about consensus building, and it's over. Like, that is the character. Scott Morrison is the character of the contemporary Liberal Party. And his tactic in this debate, I think, looked hostile and desperate. This was no, great statesperson. This was no, man who's been in this role for these years and presided over difficult circumstances and seen his character emerge. The tactic was he'd ask Albo a question and not let Albo answer it. And it was just finger-pointing, bullying, you could see Albo get defensive because, anyone would. I just had that moment of going, I couldn't do it. I couldn't be a politician. I'd be like,
across the desk,
throwing water in his face and storming out, which is not the person who I want to be. But it was.
And the classic Morrison thing about passing on the big issue. So he tries to these classic. It's not my fault moments now that stuck out to me. Paula Darwin. Not my fault. That was the territories that made that decision under their government.
Country Liberal Party, which is the Liberal Party.
So not my fault. And
one of their diffusion brands, but still the Liberal Party.
And the other one was the issue around his initial support for the joint home ownership scheme that was running in a number of states and still is running in a number of states, which is Labor policy. And he said, "Oh, yes, I supported that scheme, but that was a state scheme." So rather than the idea being the issue, he tried to sort of wiggle his way out saying, "Oh, yeah, I supported the states taking this position, but not a federal government." That was his way of once again trying to flip the truth on.
I've got to say, given that the narrative around Scott Morrison's particular gender politics or approach to gender politics, when the question is, do you have a problem appealing to women? You don't go, let me tell you how many women have violence inflicted upon them, which was a really odd way to answer that question. And all I could think was, we probably were really lucky not to be met with bullets.
I was going to say that was his response last time, wasn't it?
And it was just he didn't answer that question. In fact, he confirmed why the question gets asked. I found that really disturbing. And to try and turn it into this whole, where was the independent investigation into Kimberley Kitching? Brittany Higgins tweeted, where was the independent investigation into what happened to me, which I thought was pretty relevant to that particular conversation. It was an unpleasant hour.
It was
an unpleasant hour. I hope we lighten the mood.
Yeah.
I hope our emoji puppetry. In fact, I went to drama school and can tell you this is a form of French puppetry. What we're doing, hex well spent. I hope that did lighten the mood because there were parts of it that I just found abrasive.
We're doing a bit of fourth wall. We should actually talk to somebody who was watching with a keen ear from Australian Union's Assistant Secretary of the ACTU, Liam O'Brien, is here for a bit of a post-debate analysis for us from his home. I'm sure he had the rubber remote control out too, throwing it at the tally at different times.
At which points did you scream at the television, Liam?
Well, I was actually really worried, and I still am, that I'm going to wake the children with the amount of screaming that was going on in this house. It was a hard slog to watch that. It was a level of obnoxiousness from the Prime Minister that I'd actually not ever encountered before at that level. Like, it really was amazing just how rattled he was.
I wonder if anybody passed him a little slip of paper. I don't know if anybody who was keenly watching the debate saw the news that broke on social media that News Poll has now got Labor 54-46 ahead. So the News Poll, which is slightly more reliable in historical terms than the Ipsos poll, which we discussed earlier, which had Labor at 57-43. Both of these polls have come in. We're 2 weeks out from the election. Voting starts
Tomorrow,
pre-poll.
Tomorrow.
And I'm just wondering if there was a text message or some semaphore code from Liberal staffs in the audience.
I would like to think that there was flags involved. Did someone standing in the back with the semaphore flags?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we're coming to. I mean, to have yourself heard, you need a flag in that environment, to be honest. When Scott Morrison yells, he yells. Liam, what were the big issues for you in the debate? Like, do you think we actually got anywhere near to talking about what's motivating the electorate and what the electorate's priorities are?
Look, I will say, in terms of the two debates that we've seen today, tonight was a vote for not letting journalists ask these stupid questions that continue to dominate the debate. I think, despite who broadcast the previous one, getting regular punters to ask questions actually means that we talk about the issues that matter. Look, I agree with you. Firstly, on the news poll stuff, I think what we can really expect, and we saw it a bit tonight, is that the next 2 weeks from this Prime Minister are going to be so negative. I think they are really going to just ratchet it up another level. But what was really, I think quite, revealing tonight is that when we did talk about issues, just how floundering the Prime Minister was. And I think the really key ones, both in terms of at the start of the debate where we talked about cost of living and wages, but indeed I thought Anthony Albanese's closing on wages was the strongest that we've seen so far. And I think this is the part which the government's really failing with. We are under huge pressure. Cost of living is going up everywhere. And this government has made it its brand to suppress wages for a decade. Like, this has been something that this government has stood out and made as a real message in terms of their economic plan. The Prime Minister's right. We're seeing inflation and interest rates rising around the world, but only in Australia are we seeing this, downward pressure on wages like nowhere else in the world. And I think this is something that's really coming home to hurt the Prime Minister because of the fact that they've made this such a big part of their plan for the last decade.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it was extraordinary. Like I said before the debate, the big issue that I'm struggling with at the moment is aged care. And I mean, just we've created all these home care places. That's very interesting, Scott Morrison, because my mother has a palliative diagnosis and it took 9 months to get any help. But he was saying, yes, well, we've known there have been problems with aged care for a while, and it's like, well, you didn't do anything about it. And what are those problems with aged care? Well, let's talk about them. There are low wages in the sector, which discourages workers from staying in the sector. High rates of burnout, all of these problems. There's privatisation and outsourcing. Low wages, privatisation and outsourcing are literally the three pillars of Liberal economic policy. That is what they stand for. That is what they've done to aged care, to disabilities, to public service, any kind of screw they can put on the economy.
So they can't be the people to fix it because their ideology runs diametrically opposed to
prohibits them from fixing it. Like, it is not in their DNA to want to be active and involved in fixing these sectors. They are very much of the free market. This is how things are supposed to be in their world. I think what's really interesting is this debate about, nurse on call, the sort of 24/7 nursing stuff. Scott Morrison's argument essentially is that, Anthony Albanese won't be able to find the nurses to work there. Yet at the same time, we've got, a wages case about the low pay for those workers. I mean, it's amazing how when it suits them, supply and demand economics just disappears from their understanding, and it just completely, underscores just how out of touch they really are when it comes to aged care.
Liam, one of the other issues that I was gobsmacked to hear the Prime Minister basically go into bat for the insecure and dangerous work of the gig economy and just say, not even address the reality of the working experience of those in working for tech gig companies, and basically saying this is just small business people trying to make their way in the world. He was not interested at all in dealing with the countless realities that we've heard time after time after time from workers in that predicament, who are exploited by the ability of these companies just to take advantage of their circumstance. It was extraordinary. He had no interest in addressing it whatsoever.
Absolutely. I mean, who knew such a curly question like should every worker in this country get paid the minimum wage would be met with such creative nuance, that there were suddenly all of these exceptions that maybe would mean that workers were not entitled to the minimum wage. I think it's spectacular that Scott Morrison probably hasn't met a worker in the agriculture sector, because what everybody else knows is the shameful rates of pay that those workers, a lot of whom are foreign workers in exploited arrangements, have been facing. We have a real crisis in this country when it comes to wage theft, and Scott Morrison doesn't think it applies. So, when we talk about cost of living, being able to make sure your wages are paid is a critical failure of the government, and that is absolutely something this government could be doing more about, something state governments have had to step in and deal with, because the Morrison government's been completely absent from the whole issue of wage theft in this country.
Something unions have had to do. Unions have had to carry the battle on this the entire last 9 years, because there's no support from the federal government whatsoever into trying to meet the challenge of big tech and insecure work coming together.
Oh, it's extraordinary. And it's extraordinary that he can run that, these are small business people. And it's like, but we've seen not only systemic wage exploitation, but systemic occupational health and safety abuses across across those sectors as well. I mean, there have been deaths in the delivery industry, and this is supposed to be Scott Morrison's great capitalist dream. Like, they're just, plucky, independent,
pulling themselves up by their bootstraps, literally. It is. Yeah, you're right,
from,
man. I mean,
on the road.
Insecure work has long been associated with higher rates of injury and death, and we have seen it right in our faces when it comes to gig work. In particular, in New South Wales, we saw 5 deaths in 1 year. In 1 year, 5 people killed. And the Morrison government has no plan for this. There is absolutely no plan for it. This is just business as usual. We know that gig work is rising. We know that these platforms are moving beyond just food delivery and ride sharing into a whole range of other activities. This is the future. If it is not better regulated so that unions have got the ability to organise these workers, so that we can make sure that workers are getting a minimum wage in those sectors, then this is what the future is under the Morrison government. And insecure work is a really big issue in this country. We have some of the highest rates of insecure work in the world, and for no good reason.
Look, we're almost out of time because we've been here for 2 hours. It's been a great experiment in democracy for us.
Yeah, I thought you guys might be interested in some of the spin that we are seeing come online.
What do you got there?
Well, apparently, the idea is that Albo can't do the things that he's promising to do in terms of lifting wages, which is kind of extraordinary. There seems to be an amazing conviction in Australian media circles over the past few days that economies sort of work in ways that we fundamentally know they do not work. There's sort of a very large gap in economic understanding that is going on. Because if we talk about raising wages, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Liam, things that the Liberal government of Scott Morrison could do to raise wages would include removing wage caps on public servants, allowing unions to organise freely and to bargain and demand wage
support
increases.
the Australian Union's minimum wage case for a rise in the minimum wage, support the union's attempt to get a fair work case going in the aged care sector for the mandated in the Royal Commission 25% pay rise. Nothing to be seen from this government on that.
Yeah, lift standards of pay by offering better wages and conditions in the public sector and actually creating competition, favourite Tory word, that the private sector has to raise wages in order to meet. It's extraordinary. They're also saying that, cost of living is a problem, but, where are Albo's details and what he's going to do about it? And I'm like, did I miss the bit where Albo repeatedly talked about the kind of interventions required in the economy in order to lift wages? I seem to have heard that again and again. Am I wrong? Was I having a fever dream?
No.
It was pretty depressing. Like, the level of interruption that Anthony copped, in particular when he was explaining policies that were directly targeted at both reducing the cost of living, but also increasing wages. And like, you're absolutely right. The things that the government could be doing, just showing any effort, any interest in wages going up would be a positive sign, I think, for a lot of workers. And that's a key difference between Anthony Albanese and Scott Morrison. Here is a guy who actually wants to do something about lifting wages. On the other hand, Scott Morrison is entirely indifferent to wages, and as we know, over the last decade, has been actively suppressing them. So you're right, absolutely, removing the cap on public sector wages, intervening and endorsing Australian Union's minimum wage case to see minimum wages increase by more than inflation. Like, inflation is running at 5.1%. It's due, according to the RBA, going to get to 6% by the end of the year. That is a massive increase in the cost of everything that we all have to pay for, and our wages are not keeping up with it. Aged care, absolutely. You talked before about your own experience, Van, but these are some of the most vulnerable Australians being cared for by people on basically the minimum wage. We need a serious. Yeah, it is shameful. We think about aged care, childcare, all of our caring industries, which you're right, highly feminised. We have a significant issue in this country about gender segregation of work. But these are people that perform extremely important roles for the community, and they deserve a decent wage. And Scott Morrison,
I'm sure Jenny Morrison will come up with a really great plan.
Only one Jenny tonight.
Any day now. I did scream aloud at the
only got the one
Jenny Morrison. We're going to have to wrap it up, but I thank you so much for your contribution, Liam. I would have much preferred to hear more from you than from whatever was going on the television. I do want to announce that Channel 9 have declared a winner of the debate.
Was it this? Was this the winner?
No, that wasn't the winner. That didn't go down particularly well. The verdict is 49 for Albo to 45 for Morrison, with 6 undecided of the crowd.
I can't speak for others, but I had real problems voting. I don't know if anyone else has had the problem, but we need to do something about NBN in this country, because that thing kept crashing, every time we go and vote.
Like, invest in infrastructure. I mean, call me crazy or just a basic democratic citizen. That's kind of extraordinary. I do want to just give I think the three of us should just give our parting, most revealing moment. For me, it was when Scott Morrison was asked, would you resign the leadership of the Liberal Party in order to keep your party in government? Would you enact one moment of self-sacrifice for the greater good?
Not going to happen.
And he said, would you? And I just thought,
come on, what are we talking about?
You really did enjoy that holiday in Waikiki, didn't you? So that was my moment. Liam, what was yours?
Oh, look, I got to go back to the minimum wage one. Like, this should be a lay down, easy answer. Yes, absolutely, every worker in this country should be paid no less than the minimum wage. The fact that he turned around and tried to suggest that it's a complicated affair is just, it speaks volumes just how little, sense of reality that this man has got.
Yeah, mine was at the end. I thought Anthony Albanese actually got the urgency of now right in that final closing statement about how these issues need to be addressed right now. And I thought the way that he actually made the moment matter was really strong. It was a great finish. And I think, for the next 2 weeks, he needs to build on that. That needs to be the message. And that's the interesting thing for everyone now, as we're all politically engaged. Whoever's watching this he cares about the issues. To have those conversations with our families and our friends when these issues come up, calmly talk to them about the issues that matter.
Or not so calmly.
Can we do that?
Family. Yeah, we're not that calm. It's not really our vibe.
No, I kind of not mine, but for the rest of the people out there who can actually stay centered, rather than throw their rubber remote control at television. To have those conversations, because this election is still very much alive and it needs to be won. Look, Liam, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening, and we'll see you over the next couple of weeks, no doubt, around the traps, comrade.
Thank you both. Thanks, everybody, for watching too. And happy Mother's Day to all the mothers. There's a couple of hours left. If you haven't called them, hurry up.
Yeah, get onto it. Liam O'Brien, their Assistant
You're
Secretary
a good boy,
at the ACTU. That's it for us, fam. It's been fantastic. We really didn't have much of an idea what we were doing before we started, but I think we almost got away with it.
You know, I've got to say, I did love the French puppetry. It made me feel very valid in my education. It's been great hanging out with you. It always is. I'd like to acknowledge all the Australian Union staff who worked on a Sunday night to put all of this together. It was a wild idea and we got there. We hope you found us entertaining. We hope the lens that we were able to put on the events this evening was something that you felt restored a bit of balance in the media discussion.
That's what we tried to
Maybe
do.
a bit of a perspective from working people kind of sentiment bled through the screaming and holding up the signs and my own personalised rant.
So thank you to Kim and to Vicky and to Ben who's out there, and also to Peter McGrath, who's our colleague who's not well at the moment. He's got COVID.
Who has remote directed from COVID isolation.
He's done an amazing job to make all this happen, and let's do it again if we get another chance soon.
And you know, if you're not a member of a union, you should totally join one.
AustralianUnions.org.au. That's where you need to be. Thanks,
right.
everyone. Have
We
a great
love you.
evening.
Bye.
Bye for now.
Happy democracy.
No sausages tonight. What's going on?